I was on the construction side for quite some time. I was in prior to being on the construction side, I was in all different forms of build-X. So I was in HVAC, I was in electrical contracting, and then that morphed into more generalistic contracting. And I worked for a specialist that specialized in different forms of prefabrication. And through that process, I also realized that a lot of our clients and owners were really struggling with the concept about how to make those types of projects successful. And so I went back to school and did a master's in offsite housing construction. And that was the impetus to then starting Bridge. And a lot of that work was really focused on process and systems thinking and how you then apply that to construction, which is, so that's all I've really done is that type of work.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Builder's Bible. I'm joined by James Broadhead, who's the founder of Bridge Development, and I'm really excited to dive into it with him today. He has a ton of industry experience and is going to bring a bit of a different angle to the conversation. James, tell us a bit of the story. How did you get started with Bridge Development, and then where are you guys at today?
Yeah, so Bridge Community Development is a development consultancy that works with a lot of different Indigenous communities. Right now, we've got about a deal flow of 137 million projects in construction. And the reason I really started Bridge was because I saw a big gap in how projects were being delivered and how much more could be done on the owner's side to try and make them more successful.
All right, well, tell us a little bit about the scope of work that you normally do. What kinds of projects do you normally do, and what kinds of people are hiring you for those projects?
So largely it's owners that really need some extra help in terms of capacity or even in capability. So we've got an extensive experience in construction. And so if you've got someone that's never delivered a big construction program before, they need some extra help. And that's really where we come in. So it really falls into the category of either capacity or it falls into capability. So sometimes we work with people that are incredibly talented about what they do, but they tend to be more focused in the operation side. And if they haven't got the experience in how to deliver a construction program, they usually just don't even know where to start. And so that's really where they bring our skill set in, is to be able to help with that. The type of projects that we work on is everything from infrastructure, housing, childcare, medical buildings. It's every part of the built environment. And so when you're working in that type of environment, every single project needs a slightly different approach because the outcomes can be very unique to that community.
How are people finding you typically? Is it referral, or do you have a sales team? Do you have a funnel?
Right now, the majority of people find us because it's referral based. And so they hear about the type of work that we're doing, or they see that there's a common problem. And so you might find that there's a contractor or an architect that's working with the community, and that they can see the need, they see the desire, they see the opportunity, but they might be missing the funding. And so they might bring us in to try and help support them into actually trying to secure the funds in the first place. Or there's a project that's potentially going awry, and so they bring us in to try and help right-size it. So the majority of the work we do right now is predominantly referral-based, and that's because of the sector that we're serving on that Indigenous side.
What is something that you typically share in your value prop? If I'm considering hiring you versus a competitor, what kind of differentiates your company against the competition?
When you typically come and meet someone that does development consultancy in a space, they usually only specialize either in one vertical, so it might be just in housing, for example, or they work on just the capital project management side to deliver it. What we try and do is we try and cover more verticals. So it's not just the housing side, it might be the infrastructure. The reason we do that is that we find that when we're building out projects, it invariably becomes something else as a pinch point, or something else within that community in terms of development has a knock-on impact. So housing can impact even the size of the childcare that's required. Or if you're building a housing project, which is one of the biggest needs that we get involved in, they might not have the right infrastructure in place. And so what usually would happen is that people would say, I don't deal with that type of work. Whereas for us, we deal with all of it. We're experts in construction. So that's why people would usually work with us versus somebody else. And then the other point would be that we actually go a lot. We start earlier and we finish later. And so when you look at the development cycle where someone's got an idea about what they want to build, it really should start with planning. And if that planning isn't done effectively, or if it's done very effectively, it can actually help support the funding, which then leads into the capital project management and then leads into the actual delivery of the operations.
What's your background out of curiosity? How did you wind up in the construction development space? Like, what did you study? What was your early career?
I was on the construction side for quite some time. I was in the prior to being on the construction side, I was in all different forms of build-X. So I was in HVAC, I was in electrical contracting, and then that morphed into more generalistic contracting. And I worked for a specialist that specialized in different forms of prefabrication. And through that process, I also realized that a lot of our clients and owners were really struggling with the concept about how to make those types of projects successful. And so I went back to school and did a master's in offsite housing construction. And that was the impetus to then starting Bridge. And a lot of that work was really focused on process and systems thinking and how you then apply that to construction, which is, so that's all I've really done is that type of work.
Well, talk to us about some of maybe the pain points or sticking points that you feel like you're going through as a company right now.
I think the one of the biggest pain points that we find is the work that we do is very human orientated. So it becomes very labor intensive. And so when we're working with communities, you're working with people that are incredible in what they're looking to try and achieve. And we find that we need to spend a lot of time on that human side to be able to work and actually give people confidence to be able to move forward. And there's a lot of education that's required. So on that front end, when you're working in community development, it's a bit different than working on a specific project with one stakeholder. There's usually many stakeholders. So you've got everyone from chief and council, you've got elders, you've got youth, then you've got the departments. And within that, everything tends to be very siloed. And so one of the biggest pain points that we really find is how are we bringing the entire community together to be able to move them through a project? And also the amount of work that we need to do that is historically been quite manual is something that we can try and replace with AI systems to get more efficiency, which will allow us just to focus more on the human nature of the work that we need to do and really helping to support people.
What do you feel like of all the processes or things in your business that could be most, where you could implement or use AI the most? Which of those kind of processes do you feel like is most ripe for it?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at AI, I think a lot of people have been thinking about AI from a standpoint of chat GPT's come out and they can ask it to do things but where it's actually going to me is fascinating. So where I think that we've been and where I thought I was at up until a few weeks ago is that I thought we were using AI in quite an intelligent way. But actually what we're going to really focus on over the next few months is how we can adopt it into every single workflow that we're doing. We're working with the wider team within Bridge to try and replace about 90% of their manual administrative-based work with AI systems. And so the idea is that every time they're doing something that's more manual, is that we actually want to see if there's a system that can replace that type of work, either in terms of a step or a complete workflow. So we're actually in the process of rolling out Copilot for everybody within our team. And then also, I think the biggest part is not just on the AI side in what it can do, it's even how you use it and having the education to be able to use it. And that to me, I think has probably been the biggest eye-opener for me, is that when you start putting in better inputs, go figure, you get better outputs. And so that's an area that we see is going to be incredibly valuable. But as a sector on the construction side, the way AI will be, I think, in 18 months' time is going to be way further ahead from the capability standpoint than the market will even understand. You start thinking about the robotics side that can happen, whether that's robotics that are doing done and dangerous type of activities like roofing, working at heights. You think of how more efficient you can be if you're putting a robot at risk versus a human. I just think it's going to be an incredible space and make us very efficient.
That's awesome. What's a project either you've worked on or you are working on that has been really challenging or fun or that gets you excited?
The work that we do, I find, is incredibly emotional, which isn't something that we typically talk about in the construction space. But I find that when we're working with communities, the need is just so great. And the feel-good factor of being able to hand over the keys to a community, whether that's housing or childcare, is incredible. There was a project we worked on last year where there's children which were taken away from the community, which historically, I don't know if anyone knows all the history of that. I'm sure many people do, but I'm not the authority on the subject or to be able to speak about that. But we were engaged to try and help bring the children home through being able to provide a space that was safe, that the community can actually house the children as they were coming out of foster care. But they only had 6 months to do it. And so through that process, you've really got to dig deep to look at all the best practices, how you apply yourself, which contractors you can work with. But the rewarding factor of that is to actually not only be able to pull that off and deliver homes in 6 months. To give that context, Andrew, that project was completely bare land. And so to go from bare land with full infrastructure, water, all the septic that needs to be pumped in, as well as then go through a procurement process to find the contractors and then be able to build it and go through the design process, that's a very quick time frame and a turnaround. And that for me is probably one of the most rewarding projects I've worked on.
That's really cool. What is something, either life or business, faith, fitness, whatever, it could be anything that gets you fired up that we haven't talked about?
Mindset and process. They're the two things that really get me going. On the personal side, it's really about kids and family. That's incredibly important to me. But I also look at a lot of the challenges which they currently face. And I think that all the things that I try and take from a business standpoint and try and help them, it's usually around mindset. And that to me is really the biggest thing. But I also think that everybody is unique in terms of where they're at and where they're trying to get to. And it's a process, right? And I think if we focus more on the process side, I think we can all get a lot further ahead. So to me, it's mindset.
Last question. You and I are both members of the Dan Martell coaching community. And, we've all kind of read some of his stuff or his book. What are some ways that Buy Back Your Time has influenced you, or some of Dan's coaching has influenced you?
Dan Martell, I think, is a very special human. It's been a bit of a game changer for me. When I was first starting out, I was hitting these ceilings. I was really struggling with just being able to get some time back to focus in the right places, and being able to start working through that ladder from really bringing on an administrator to start with, and then working on the operations, and then moving to sales and marketing, and then leadership. It really allowed me to scale very quickly. And when I first brought on an administrator and I actually handed over everything to that level of detail, I was blown away about how actually inefficient I'd been. And that really opened my eyes to really focusing on things which are the biggest and most highest value practices, and really focusing on where you spend your time. And that's the one commodity that we all have. So that to me, I think, was probably the biggest eye-opener. And I found that through that process of really digging deep on working on the business, but also on myself, has opened up so many more doors than I even thought was possible in a very short space of time.
James, if people want to learn more about who you are and what you do, where can they go?
They can go to bridgedevelopment.ca. That's probably the best place, or they can go to LinkedIn and see me there, or James_Broadhead on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, don't go anywhere. I want to chop it up with you, but thanks so much for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me.